obviously we're in a completely wild strategic situation. Uh, what's clear is that the world has been so horrified by what has been carried out by the Israelis with American backing in Gaza and the West Bank and the bombing of Lebanon and the bombing of Qatar and the bombing of Iran, that uh, pressure has come to at least try to appear that there will be an end to this genocide. The plan put forward by President Trump and Tony Blair is not really a peace plan. It is a fallacy of composition, since it acts as if the Israeli state is the one that's suffering and they have to be protected from the Palestinians instead of vice versa. And there's a lot that can be said. The point is to seize this little crack and widen it to get a flood through to completely change everything. And as Helga has stressed, the only way you really solve this is by changing the entire nature of the way nations relate to each other. What came up in the UN General Assembly is one head of state or foreign minister said after the other, it appears that the rule of law is over. What are we under? The law of the jungle, where it's the strongest can do whatever they want and there's no principle of truth. What I wanted to just do a little bit is to review what happened to LaRouche. The fact that he was feared so very much that they spent tens of millions of dollars, every intelligence agency, the news media, everything coordinated in an effort to make it possible to lock him up in an outrageous case, which people might have objected to had they not thought he was a terrible person. And I'm going to just share with you some images, and I apologize, hold on a second, that just given the shortness of time to prepare, this may not be as cohesive and coherent as I would like. But today, October 6th, is the 39th anniversary of a raid. And if you can't see the text under this picture of two FBI agents walking down the street of Leesburg, Virginia, one of whom is carrying a sledgehammer. On this day, October 6, 1986, 400 FBI agents, federal marshals, that I think that might be Deputy Donnie Moore from the Loudoun County Sheriff's Department, got together, raiding LaRouche's offices and headquarters and surrounding his home. And LaRouche was able to get a telegram out to Reagan saying, basically, if these people invade my house, I will defend myself. Any bloodshed will be on your hands. Reagan had not been informed of this. He was on his way to Reykjavik, actually, where Gorbachev was going to try and pressure him to give up on the Strategic Defense Initiative. But he did order them to stand down. As best we can tell, William Weld, the Bushes, and others were involved in this. And we know from FOIA requests that Deputy Donnie Moore said that he intended to, quote unquote, pump LaRouche full of bullets on this, but happily it did not occur. Now, other news, as you may have heard, and you'll see why these things are related, Kash Patel has, as it says here, publicly severed the FBI's decades-long partnership with the Anti-Defamation League, accusing the Jewish advocacy group of political bias and unauthorized surveillance of Americans. I don't even know why you would call it Jewish. It is simply an organized crime operation that pretends that it has something to do with Judaism to not be attacked, basically. Now, let me see what I did next. Oh, just to give you a sense. So here in 1984, we filed a lawsuit against the Anti-Defamation League and NBC Television Lyndon LaRouche, head of a political cult group. And if you can see, oh shoot, can I go backwards? I have this annoying bar here. Can you see the headline? Yeah, Jewish Telegraphic Agency is the agency that put out this news service. So Lyndon LaRouche, head of a political cult group and an independent candidate for president of the United States, lost the libel suit he brought against the Anti-Defamation League of Brith and NBC TV. A 6-person jury in the federal court of the Eastern District of Virginia, which of course, this is where the FBI, CIA, every alphabet soup person is on the jury, said that last Thursday, the ADL had not defamed LaRouche when it described him as an, quote, anti-Semite, unquote, and a, quote, small-time Hitler, unquote. That's what the ADL said about LaRouche. And this was, I think, used by NBC television. The statements were made by Erwin Sewell, director of ADL's fact-finding department, on an NBC TV program, First Camera, aired on March 4th, 1984. During the trial, the judge dismissed LaRouche's charge that the ADL and NBC had engaged in a conspiracy to defame him. No, they just coincidentally happened to do it. We'll come back to this. Here is some of it. So that was 84. This is from, hold on a second. Let me just go. Yeah. All right. So this is a document that we finally got our hands on in 1992, which is a letter to the director of the FBI from the New York office about Lyndon Hermile LaRouche Jr., also known as Lynn Marcus. And they write, in viewing the New York case file, it is noted that information has been received that the CPUSA, Communist Party USA, is conducting an extensive background investigation on the subject for the purpose of ultimately eliminating him and the threat of the NCLC, National Caucus of Labor Committees, on Communist Party operations. Several sources have furnished this information to the New York office, and this information has appeared in the Daily World newspaper several times. NCLC sources, so they admit they have people inside LaRouche's association, have advised that the subject is the controlling force behind the NCLC and all of its activities, etc. Okay, so the Communist Party is working with the FBI to eliminate LaRouche. Oh, look at that. I turned blue. Isn't that interesting? Okay, well, you don't need to.
Well, Diane, if you could go back, just the paragraph just under what you were reading there. The New York proposes submitting a blind memorandum.
Yeah. A blind memorandum to the Daily World Communist Party newspaper in New York City, which has been mailed from outside this area to help facilitate Communist Party investigations on the subject. It is felt that this would be appropriate under the Bureau's counterintelligence program. The blind memorandum is attached, which I don't know if we have that or not. Do you want to say anything about that?
Well, just that this is the mousecrap leaflet. The FBI was involved, and the ADL got into this a little bit later. But the FBI was circulating material deliberately to inflame left groups and others to take physical action to eliminate LaRouche.
So what Lynn says in this wonderful paper called He's a Bad Guy, but We Can't Say Why, is that the evidence against the mass media includes the role of the New York Times in January and February of 1974. In other words, he's saying that this is coordinated with the FBI Communist Party attack on LaRouche, which began in August of 73. Was that August? I forget what the date was on that. So by January, February of 74, the New York Times produces a massive fraudulent campaign of public defamation of me, LaRouche, in the Times' effort to provide a diversionary cover-up for that FBI elimination operation. during the entirety of the nearly 3 decades, he's a bad guy, but we can't say why paper was written in the year 2000. So he's talking from 1970 to the year 2000. Since that lying concoction by the Times, virtually the entirety of the US major news media has become a wittingly complicit part of that same continuing dirty political operation centered in the US Department of Justice. And this is this is a quote from the Washington Post, which does a similar smear. September 24th, 1976, Stephen Rosenfeld writes an op-ed in the Washington Post entitled NCLC, a Domestic Political Menace, in which he sets out a media policy for dealing with LaRouche. Quote, this is in a public article in the Washington Post. We of the press should be chary of offering them print or airtime. There is no reason to be too delicate about it. Every day we decide whose voices to relay. A duplicitous, violence-prone group with fascistic proclivities, that's LaRouche, should not be presented to the public unless there is reason to present it in those terms. So never say anything about LaRouche unless you say duplicitous, violence-prone, fascist, extremist, anti-Semitic, etc. Otherwise, don't mention the name. The government should be encouraged to take all legal steps to keep the NCLC from violating the political rights of other Americans. And I just want to say here that the whole point about this paper is LaRouche said they got it. And we used to run into this all the time. Like you'd reserve a room at a convention center, and the next thing you know, the room was canceled. And you could never get an explanation of why it was canceled. But LaRouche said the way they would operate is they would say, you have to understand why we had to do it this way. This is secret intelligence. We can't use our secret files in court, so we had to get him in other ways. Believe us, we can't tell you why, but he's a very bad guy. So this used to come down on landlords or hotel owners who would prevent us from renting or getting space or doing other things. And they would be told, look, we can't tell you why, it's classified, but he's a very bad guy. So you can't work with him. And that would make people all the more terrified. Oh my goodness, this must really be bad. They can't even tell us what it is. It's so bad. And that's why he called the paper this. Now I'm going to go back to these documents. All right, so this was the Washington Post. In March of 1978, the Anti-Defamation League began a systemic harassment and defamation campaign working through the Jewish Community Relations Council to demand that LaRouche's views be banned from public locations and publishing the lie in various press outlets that LaRouche was the most dangerous and violent right-wing extremist around. And we'll come to that in a minute. Or actually, I'll come back to this. Let me go to this because this is pretty wild. So this is a special report put out by the Anti-Defamation League in 1995. It's called, and this was after the federal building in Oklahoma got bombed, right? The militia menace grows. Now listen to this. I'm very intrigued. This is in that report. Near New York City, militias, which were formed in November 1994 in Dutchess and Orange counties, or militias were formed. The Orange County Militia, which has more recently been known as the Committee of Correspondence, has distributed literature incorporating conspiracy theories from political extremist Lyndon LaRouche. Founder Walter Reddy, while reportedly distancing himself from the group, has also expressed the suspicion that the federal government was involved in the Oklahoma City bombing. Reddy stated, "It was CIA orchestrated from the information I have." Now, I'm sure everyone here would never suspect that the CIA would be involved in creating a terror attack so that they could fulfill some political agenda, which is what he was saying. But so this is just an example of one of the reports by the Anti-Defamation League attacking LaRouche long ago. So I'm going to go back up to this book. So when LaRouche was in prison, so all of this slander and tens of thousands of articles in the mainstream media saying all these horrible things about LaRouche made it very easy for them to frame him up and give him a 15-year jail sentence on an absurd charge of conspiracy to confuse the Internal Revenue Service and mail fraud, and to give many other LaRouche associates very long sentences from 3 years to 77 years. So in 1992, from prison, LaRouche said, look, we're going to fight back. So we commissioned this book called The Ugly Truth About the ADL. And we got out thousands of copies all over the place. And this is part of it. It had just come out that the ADL had been involved in spying on a whole bunch of organizations. So this is from the preface. Far from living up to its thoroughly undeserved and self-promoted reputation, the Anti-Defamation League has been caught by San Francisco police investigators, and it's a whole bunch of points. One, illegally spying on at least 950 political organizations, including the NAACP, the Rainbow Coalition, Greenpeace, the Simon Wiesenthal Center, okay, another Jewish organization, the United Auto Workers, the Christic Institute, the New Jewish Agenda, Operation Rescue, Liberty Lobby, the Nation of Islam, the United Farm Workers, ACT UP, the American Civil Liberties Union, the National Lawyers Guild, the Bo Gritz presidential campaign, and the political movement led by Lyndon LaRouche. So they discovered that the Anti-Defamation League was spying on 950 organizations, also infiltrating countless police and sheriff departments across the country, bribing police officers, and illegally obtaining classified government data on at least 20,000 U.S. citizens. The ADL was also caught selling information on anti-apartheid groups to agents of the South African government. They were passing surveillance and classified police data on Arab Americans to Israeli authorities, who then used the data to illegally detain American citizens who visited Israel. And they also were passing off Israeli intelligence propaganda as ADL-generated research in an effort to sway American public opinion and government policy while never being forced to register as foreign agents. Okay, this is 1992. We put this out. Now, how did this work? Well, one of the things that we learned was here, during a period including May of 1983, the NBC TV reporter Pat Lynch participated in planning sessions hosted by New York private banker John Train. These meetings featured Train's coordinating role using agents of NBC TV, the Wall Street Journal, Reader's Digest, the Anti-Defamation League, and members of the intelligence community then linked to Vice President George Bush and Lieutenant Colonel Oliver North to orchestrate a coordinated campaign of mass media defamation against the 12333, which is an executive order saying that you don't have to disclose private sources of money, targeted LaRouche. So think about this. Oh, you're just a conspiracy theorist. We got Freedom of Information documents that showed that people from NBC, the Anti-Defamation League, Oliver North, the Wall Street Journal, Reader's Digest were all meeting together in one place in John Train's apartment to map out their campaign against LaRouche. That's not us saying this. This is what the documents showed. Pittsburgh multimillionaire Richard Mellon Scaife of Ted Olson salon notoriety was a key backer of the operation, which brought Dennis King and drug use promoter John Foster Chip Burley into the Train's operations. As ADL operative Myra Boland, this is Myra Lansky Boland, testimony later showed, Pat Lynch, NBC TV's Pat Lynch, had lied under oath in deposition hearings respecting John Train's role in shaping her libelous frauds of March of 1984. That is the case which we filed for libel and lost because of the setup. Now, this is just a document. The first trial that they did to LaRouche in Boston on alleged credit card fraud fell apart. One, because they saw that a bunch of people actually had not whatever had happened, they'd gotten their money back, sometimes multiple times over, but also that it turned out that our contention that it was a political witch hunt appeared to be true, because we discovered documents in Oliver North's safe saying our man here has the info against LaRouche, and the judge in Boston was honest enough to say, oh, well, this looks indeed like maybe it is a political witch hunt, as LaRouche is saying, and he ordered the files of George Bush searched, and I know none of you will ever guess what happened. As soon as we got permission to, and this is Bush Sr., Reagan's vice president, as soon as we got permission to search George Bush's files, the case ended in a mistrial. And they said, oh, the jury's too tired. But what happened is the jury actually told the Boston Herald that they would have voted not guilty, that had the trial continued, the jury said what was clear to them is that the entire case was caused by government misconduct and the LaRouche people were innocent of everything. So think about that, and how you've never heard of that since. That's why they had to move the case down to Alexandria, Virginia, come up with new charges in a courtroom where everyone on the jury was in the FBI, and the judge was the owner of Interarms, the largest private gun running agency in the world, which, by the way, used to be the gun running agency for the CIA. And I say used to be advisedly. Okay, so we did this. So here is LaRouche, January 27th, 1989, handcuffed. I think that's Mike Billington behind him there, on his way, taken off to start serving a 15-year jail sentence in federal prison, of which he served 5 years. Is there anything else? No, I guess that's it. So when this comes up about the Anti-Defamation League, I just have to say that there is nobody in the country that has the authority that we do on this matter. And I think some of Kash Patel's reasoning is similar. They had put Turning Point founder Charlie Kirk and the Turning Point on a list of hateful extremists. But this is really a totally criminal organization. Should not be allowed to exist, frankly. Absolutely should register as a foreign agent, but I don't know if it's only foreign agents. It's organized crime to the T. So I won't say more now, but I think that the fact that they're being gone after gives us an opportunity, a really big, wide open door to get Lynn exonerated. So I will leave it at that. We're talking about doing some things with this now that this is coming out and breaking, to get some traction also on the LaRouche case, getting his name cleared.